Thanks for joining us on Sportswomen Australia, a podcast celebrating the up-and-coming and bona fide stars of Australian women's sport and, of course, the female power brokers behind the scenes. We are all about creating an equal playing field. You're joined by Tiffany Cherry and my co-host Amanda Salanti.
Hi Tiff, I'm so looking forward to today's interview. Today we have one of the biggest names in Aussie sport, the coach of the Australian Diamonds, Lisa Alexander.
Yes, and at the helm of the Diamonds since being appointed Norma Plummer's replacement back in 2011. Lisa, it is wonderful to have you on our podcast. Thank you. First of all, I want to ask you, when was the seed planted for your love of netball?
Oh, boy, a long time ago. I had to remember that whether we had a nickname today because I'm a bit of a NetFit fan and we were sent a challenge to try and remember our first team nickname, and I really couldn't think of ours. I played for Cheltenham Church of Christ in Cheltenham. We wore black tunics with yellow and red piping around it. And actually they were quite comfortable with a lovely little yellow cotton t-shirt underneath, which is actually really comfortable also to play in. We trained at the church hall in Cheltenham and we had to go to Sunday school. Otherwise you couldn't be in the church team. So I think we were just called the Cheltenham Church of Christ Grade 5 team. So I can't remember our nickname, but that's where my love started.
What about in terms of your netball career? How would you describe it?
A good ordinary was me. Concrete mixer, I'll call myself. I was quite talented athletically. I did little athletics. I did softball. I loved Australian rules football too and would have loved to have been a footballer. When I was in grade 5, Glenn Elliott from St Kilda boarded with us at our house and he won a Kazali Award and I got to take that to school. So that was awesome in those days. Amanda may not even know what I'm talking about. But Glenn probably uses it as, I don't know, a bookend or something nowadays. But he really inspired me, I have to say. He was a really fit, actually, footballer for those days. In those days, fitness wasn't quite as high level in those early 70s and he really looked after himself well. But he also was studying commerce at Monash University, hence why he was boarding with us. So he really inspired me in that he was able to play sport really well but also was academic, and I was very academic, not so much at primary school but definitely at high school. I wanted to be the A+ student and win the Ducks. So I played my sport and I was very conscientious with my studies as well.
So what did sport mean to you growing up netball in particular? I did read that, you did have a child quite young. You were 18 at the time. Did netball play a big role in your life during that time?
Yeah, really interesting. I was still trialling for the Victorian under-21 team when I was pregnant. Not that I knew at the time. I know it sounds really weird. Here I was a year, ducks at the school, getting into medicine. I knew all about human biology and all of that stuff. I often joked with my students later on who I taught health education to that I actually used the rhythm method because I didn't want to use a contraceptive pill because it had, chemicals or something I was funny about at the time. And as somebody said to me, oh, that's actually how you get pregnant, is using the rhythm method. So, look.
Wrong chapter.
Yeah. Look, the whole thing is, if it's not on, it's not on. That's what I always used to say to my daughters as well and tell them we're very fertile, our family. But I was trialling for them and then I went to the doctor the following week and, of course, found out I was pregnant. And I was also first month of my medical studies at Monash University, so I had to discontinue those. And, it was quite a shock to the system, but, we got on with things. My partner and I at the time decided, obviously, that we wanted to keep Carly, and Carly's only just recently got married to her partner Gareth, which was very exciting last week. And she's, obviously a joy and a wonder of, really taught me a lot. To be a young mum, I think is actually a really great thing. I wouldn't want to encourage it of everyone, but certainly I know I encourage the Diamonds and my netballers to actually think about being a mother at a younger age because in many respects it's actually really good. But obviously it interrupts your your netball career as well. So that's just part of it you have to deal with. I had Carly, and I got straight back into netball through a married ladies competition. That's what it was called in those days. It's probably called something more appropriate these days, like social netball. And the two women there really, from the East Doncaster Netball Club, got me in and really wrapped their arms around me and made it easy for me to bring Carly to netball, and I could start playing again. And that actually was a good plan for them, because instead of going back to Melbourne Blue, who I had been playing with, which was Norma Plummer's club, and Norma had a discussion with me about this later on and asked questions about it, and I told her the truth.
Can you tell us the truth?
Yeah, I will, definitely. She thought I didn't play for Melbourne Blue because Anne Henderson at the time, who was the president of the club, would have viewed me as an unmarried mother and would have looked down upon me. And I said, no, Norma, that's not it at all. I wouldn't have worried about that. I actually knew I was going to get in the seconds at East Doncaster, and I was going to be in the thirds at Melbourne. So what would you do? So anyway, we cleared that up between us.
So what about your coaching aspirations? Did Norma inspire that?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think Norma, as my state coach, kind of knew that I had a bit of knowledge and strategy about what I did. And I know she always used to put me with players, and please forgive me, Sue Hawkins is a dear friend of mine from years back, but she put me with Sue because I was the married one, and I would handle her well. Because Sue was, Sue's a superstar. She's an Australian player, and we needed Sue to play well in our team. So, of course, I said to Norma, yes, of course I'll room with Sue. And we had a brilliant time together. So it just goes to show what people think and how they view people.
And how you can be way off the mark.
Yeah, how you can be way off the mark. And, Sue can seem prickly to people, but really she's high performance and all about doing so well, and her shooting at that time was so important to us, and we won that championship in Darwin. Norma had us out, I can remember that, oh my goodness, that Indian file. Actually, Rosalie Jenke and I talk about that a lot because she was captain of the team at the time. Oh no, she wasn't captain, that's right, Jane Searle was. It was a very famous team because there's lots of coaches who've come out of that team. Simone McInnes, Jane Searle, Di Honey, myself, Kathy Gillespie as well, who was, she was a high-performance coach. So Norma actually really, she didn't do it in a way that was like, oh, you will be the next coach. She just really, I guess, engendered that real love of the tactics of the game and why you were doing things. And I think she really got that across. Her messages were terrific in that way. She also spoke to you about your role. And I remember her sitting down with me at one national championships, actually my first, and she said to me, you're going to play centre in the final. It wasn't a final in those days. It was actually the game against New South Wales, and that would determine where we finished. And she said, you're going to play centre. You're going to play on, I think it was, I'm trying to think who it was, Jenny Miller it might have been, who was a really great New South Wales player. And you're going to run her into the ground because I was really fit. So that was one of my strengths. So that was my job. But unfortunately, I got concussed in that game. I ran into Lisa B. Hagg's elbow, and she was tough. Let me assure you, it was like running into a brick wall. And I was hospitalised. So, yeah.
That coaching philosophy that Norma instilled, do you utilise that in your own coaching?
Oh, absolutely. It's been the making of me as a coach. Norma's coaching, Joyce Brown's coaching, my coach at East Doncaster as well, Dr. Robin English, who taught us how to play zone defence. So I've always kind of understood that a little bit better, I guess, from my experience with her. So all of those coaches I've picked up something from and made my own style from that. But I'm forever grateful to them. They were superb coaches. Superb. Way, way back. And they didn't get paid.
Yes. And we're still working on
And
that.
they were professional. They turned up on time all the time.
Now, there's quite a lot of parallels between teaching and leadership, especially in the sense of like developing a culture. So you tried to establish like a sisters in arms culture at the Diamonds. What did you draw on from your teaching experience and then perhaps coupled with the what you learned from other coaches to establish that culture?
Yeah, really important that you work on team dynamics as well as the actual mechanics of technical, tactical work. So I think I probably understood that implicitly from the way that the coaches went about their business, particularly Joyce Brown and Norma Plummer, the way they spoke to us and inspired us. So you sort of had that feeling of, I kind of understood high performance culture from that. There were things that I disagreed with, though. I didn't particularly agree with everything that Norma does in terms of a team, and Joyce as well. So I had to develop my own way of doing it. And my teaching actually taught me that it was really important that you set up a classroom management system, which all teachers will be nodding and saying, yes, we know what you're talking about, Lisa.
Amanda's a teacher.
And it's a behavioural framework. And I actually studied it quite a lot at Rusden because we had a great professor at the time, Ken Seedentop, who actually explicitly taught us about how to go about managing your PE class. So as well as managing your class, how you actually taught the content. So you had to really be good at both, like how you observed and how you gave feedback. Really quite revolutionary stuff that I know is really looked upon favourably in teaching these days. So I just kind of melded that together with my first state teams and just started to work on the behavioural framework with my teams that I coached, as well as, you know, the nuts and bolts of getting the ball down the end of the court and defending really well.
Which is really the culture, isn't it?
It is. It's the culture is behaviour in action. So it's what you see. So you can walk into, like I walked into a workplace, I forget the other day, and I can tell straight away because of my observational skills as a coach what's going on. And I can tell who's, you know, in a bit of a bad mood and all of those things. And you can tell the feeling comes to you anyway of whether an organisation's a happy place or it's, you know, a bit of mucking around, whatever. You can kind of tell those things because that's your skill as a teacher coming out. You observe students all the time and I can pick who's mucking around up the back of the class, particularly as a maths teacher. That's what I had to do. And I keep people accountable, and that's what I do in netball as well.
Did you establish those expectations with the team, or is it something that you sort of come up with and expect them to abide by?
Yeah, I certainly started my coaching career probably more directive way with the players that I worked with, but I did work with my captains very early and expected them to contribute. So even when I coached the 17 and under team back in 1991, I would have worked with the captain and vice captain to really inculcate the culture. And ask them what they thought and help them to be the leaders of the team, because as a captain coach I knew how important it was to lead on the court. Also as a player, I guess I investigated performance psychology quite early because I knew I got to, you know, Victorian state team level, and when I went to the Australian trials where I was picked in 87 and 88, I went to the final 20 for the World Championships in 87. And I didn't get through, but at the time I remember it was because I lacked the confidence necessary to really believe in myself. So it was something that really drove me as a coach to make sure that I started to really make that explicit with the athletes that I worked with. So those junior players who I worked with, the Susan Meanies, the Eloise Southbys, they kind of got the benefits, I guess, of me having a more psychological approach, as well as a team framework, and then, of course, the skills and tactics that I've learnt, you know, that I learnt off my coaches as well.
How daunting was it then when you were about to fill Norma Plummer's shoes? You were coming in as the 14th Australian coach in 73 years, and you were the only one who hadn't played a test for Australia.
Yeah, look, well, it was bold, wasn't it? A bold strategy. I had to be fair dinkum and I had to believe in myself. So I guess hopefully I've learnt a lot since those days when I first trialled at the AIS, and we had, I think it was 3 sessions per day in those days, and I can tell you the blisters, I can probably show you them, photos of them maybe. I don't think I took any, but, you know, myself and Michelle Wilkins often, because she made that team and she's a national selector now, we often, you know, joked about how hard it was in those days, and it was really, you were sorted out. And I remember Annie Sargent, who's my current national selector with me, saying to me, and I talk about this in our milestones presentations, that Annie actually said to me, "Oh, you just fed me beautifully." And when she said that, I was just like I was in heaven because I looked up to her so much. She was, our absolute legend of the game, and to hear that feedback from her to me was fantastic, because that was what I always sought to do as a centre court player, was to make the goalers look good and put the ball in the right place so they could turn and shoot. But what I guess I've learnt from that is that I had to leave no stone unturned in my preparation for going for the national job. And I had a mentor at the time, Bill Sweetenham, who helped me to do that. He coached me. He coached me to actually write down what my strengths were as a coach and what my winning points of difference were with the other candidates. So he was really strategic with me about me selling me. And that is a big part of what I do now, because I have to. If I don't lead and show optimism and show the way, then I'm not doing my job.
So what was the application process actually like? Like, how do you go from putting your name forward to actually getting the job? What happens in the meantime?
Yeah, we actually it was interesting. There was three of us who were put through what I would call a elite coach psychological profile / check out what your skills were like from a leadership perspective as well. And it was all done through the AIS. And so we had to become Kelly Myers, who was the potential COO of a robotics company at the time. And I remember one of the things that I put through, it's really hilarious. I decided to put, I think, robot porn or something as part of one of my creative. I know. Look, I don't know why I thought that, but I thought I've got to get creative here, and I've got to think out the side of the square. And apologies for if there's any under six. Anyway, just those ideas. It was the idea was that you were assessed on your prioritisation, your ability to strategically work through a project, to present. So you actually had actors coming in to be the people you were having meetings with, and they filmed it all. And then at the end of this, we got a big report on how we did. And I also had to do a psychological profile, those questionnaires that go forever. And for me, it's just so annoying having to do those things, because I get this, you get the same questions all the time, and I just get annoyed with them and start putting down silly answers.
So they probably thought at least we've got someone with a sense of humour.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. But what I gained from that was so much. I gained a real sense of I'm actually really, really good at this level, and I'm compared to, CEO level in terms of my ability to do a complex job. So that was great. I didn't, here I was, teacher from Wesley College teaching maths, and it's telling me that I'm CEO capable. So that's pretty awesome. Not that I particularly want to be a CEO. In fact, you probably think I am a CEO of the Diamonds, but the CEOs don't like me to say that. It must be a CEO pecking order or something, I don't know. And then the other side of it was it actually showed me that I had the disposition to be a top-level coach, because I compared favourably to the, data sets and normalising of other elite coaches, because they'd done a lot of data gathering on a lot of elite coaches in this program.
So you inherit the number one title. You come into the role on the back of knowing all this. What then is your blueprint stepping into the role?
Yeah, look, it's really important that there is some succession planning, and part of me, I guess, getting the role would have been doing the Australian 21 team, which is important because you get to practice being, do the diplomacy that's required, and that more high level of bringing that group together, which is much more complex than a club. So, all the integrity stuff that goes around it, and selection, and those parts of being a national coach put pressure on you as a person. So you've got to really be good at that. So all of that experience helped me, I guess, at the time. But the big thing that I had was we needed to really drag the whole program up to a high performance level. Now, Norma had done a fantastic job with the group, and, that through the AIS and all of those things, but we just had lost a little bit of our high performance edge, particularly around physical conditioning. But also the players were struggling with balancing their lives. And so to have a coach come in who, I guess, listened to what they had to say and really took it seriously and acted on it was really important.
And who had lived it?
I had lived it, but as I've just heard from Peter Keane, one of the world's best exercise physiologists who worked with, British cycling and everything else, as he said, we actually work in a people business, but high performance is about obsessive individuals because look, that's really how you get there. It's above the snow line. It's different. You are different. And so you've got to understand that as well. So I came in putting the challenge to the group that we could be better. And then the other side of it, we had to work on the team culture. I couldn't stand having entitled, spoilt brats as Australian Diamonds. Not that they were, but there was the potential for that to happen. And we had started to get cliques in the group who felt they were entitled to sit at the front of the bus instead of mixing with everyone. And the girls will tell you these stories. They've lived it. So you ask Geitzy, you ask Julie Corletto, they will tell you what it was like before I came in as the head coach. And we've always got to be vigilant about that. And so I guess I was before this big kerfuffle came up with, the Matildas and the cricket team and all of that stuff. I guess I saw the writing on the wall because I was desperate to be an Australian player myself, never got there, would have walked over broken glass to be an Australian player. So I could not understand why you couldn't behave in a certain way when you got there. And so it was a very big part of what I wanted to create with this group of athletes.
And how was it received by the players?
It took a little bit of time. One of the key people that really was a centre of influence for me, and I work with Ray McLean, so it's a bit of leading teams lingo, but the centre of influence is extremely important. So it's a bit like in politics. You've got to work with the people that, the whip or the person in the background that's going to get things going. Some key people helped me. Bianca Chatfield was one of them. Definitely. I spoke to her about she'd been out of favour and I thought she had a real contribution to make with the group, and I'd coached her at Phoenix and, we hadn't finished at Phoenix all that well, although she'd probably has forgotten about that. It's amazing how much she's grown as, a person, and I'm just so proud of her. She's just such a great chick, And she was really important. I said to her, look, I'll just be honest with you. If I don't think you're up to it, I'll tell you, but why don't you give it another crack in the squad? And she made it. And
That's
then
what you want, the honesty. And
she was terrific. There was a limit to her ability, a bit like Beck Bully, but she brought other things to the concrete mixing stuff we need, like get out there and do the hard work. And her and Laura Geitz together formed a formidably tough defence line that New Zealand just could not get past. I mean, Kat Latu and Maria Tutayer at the time, Maria Folau, they just found them so difficult to play on because, Laura and Bianca just wouldn't let you have a glass of water if they could. They were so tight, And the other person is Nat Von Berto, I must pay tribute to, because she was the captain at the Adelaide Thunderbirds when I was assistant coach with Jane. We formed a very tight bond, particularly around when Norma was coaching the Delhi Commonwealth Games loss. Nat really felt that because she felt like it was her fault. She'd made a mistake right at the end of the game and she was devastated and she needed picking up, and that's what we worked on together. And I was so wrapped when I'm back in my lounge room watching her in that 2011, and it's making me emotional now thinking of it. And I knew what she was trying to do at the end of the game. She just wanted to get the ball through to Nat. Instead of putting it up and over to Seabass at the time, she put a bounce pass in so that Nat would then put the pass in. And that was the right decision to make at that time. And I'm willing and saying, Nat, please put the ball in. Don't put it up in the air. Just give it to her in her stomach. It'll be okay. But you could see that was the pressure she had from Delhi that actually you live it and breathe it with the athletes. So Nat was important. She was on board with me. She was very important in me probably getting the job. She probably said, she's pretty good. Why don't you give her a go? And she helped to drive that change of culture as well, because she knew herself that it wasn't working.
So what's the culture like now in the team? Like, have you been able to maintain that positive culture throughout? And who are the leaders within the team now that you feel really uphold that positive culture?
Yeah, really good question. I think, obviously Caitlin Bassett as our captain is one of the greatest, I guess, proponents of the culture. She was with me the whole way through. So she was part of that culture that we would consider was not embracing and inspiring. But then, she was then part of the team that had a leader like Laura Geitz that actually lived and breathed the culture. And so she's been really helped along in that view. And I empowered the players because, they're the best in the world. Yeah. Why wouldn't you empower them? They're awesome. So we work together as a team, the coaching team and the players, to get the best out of ourselves. And that's how we work. The support staff have our own trademark as well, which is the pact. And the players came up with Sisters in Arms, and it's their job to look after it. We will assist them to do that. We support them, but it's not our trademark. It's actually the players. And so they think about the past, the present and the future. And Nat Medhurst actually implemented a beautiful thing, which is to give all of the diamonds a pendant with a diamond in it and their number. And it has been embraced so much by the players of the past. Like, they're just emotional. I'm getting emotional thinking about it. I had to present a few of them, but it was presented at a big dinner we had, or lunch we had before the World Cup, called the Memories and Milestones lunch, where everyone got their pendant. And it's a really important thing because I think we're up to 179. Maddie Turner just got hers. Well, she hasn't actually got her pendant yet, but it's coming. But it's just such a special thing. I can't say, I get so emotional thinking about them even getting their dresses. I get the privilege of watching the dress presentations and the words that go into that. Shani Layton got to give Maddie Turner her dress, and Shani was just over the moon to be asked back into the inner sanctum. And I said, Shani, you're welcome anytime. This is your home. We're your family, And she was, it was a great moment.
I'd say it's probably much like receiving your baggy green. Lisa, looking at the last 12 months, the loss of the Commonwealth Games and the world title, both by 1 goal each, how does that personally affect you?
Oh, it's just devastating. That's it.
How do you then pick yourself up?
Well, you have to, because it's not about me. I might be really pissed off about it, excuse the French, but I've got to lead the group out of it. It was like at the end of the game when we lost to Commonwealth, everyone was in shock. We were absolutely shocked. We thought we were going to get the ball back and get our chance to go to extra time, and we didn't. So you can't dig yourself a hole. You have to get up and you have to lead, and that's when the true leaders lead. They think about not themselves but the group. And I thought about actually the people up in the stands. Our families would have been so hurt about the players hurting too much. So it was and also you want the Australian public to think we're freaking hurting. We really were. But not to the point of despair. So there's a fine balance there. So that's what I spoke to them about after the game when we were all in our huddle, about how I wanted them to be and that I would be there for them. So I stuck fat with them all through that night. Really important that I was with them and the coaching staff, and they felt supported because, it was very hard because we were expected to win. And we'd played so well the whole week. You would not have predicted we would have come out lethargic on that morning, but we investigated it absolutely thoroughly. Many people thought, oh, no, you didn't. It wasn't transparent. Well, I'm sorry, but we don't have to tell our opposition all our secrets, thank you. We already have. Nolene's been over here investigating our system for 3 years, so we've given her a lot of intellectual property that she's taken back to use with the Kiwis. So I just want to say to the netball public that the girls and the sporting public, the girls gave it everything. You can never say they don't. They absolutely give everything, and they're just as devastated as everyone else at the end of the game.
Understanding it's a horses for courses, the loss of the Com Games to England and then the world title to New Zealand. What changes did you make from one to the other? And then on the back of both losses, what changes are you going to make moving forward?
Yeah, we obviously changed some personnel from Com Games to World Cup. And one of those, well, really a casualty of that, I guess you could say, is Gabby Simpson, because, her form was not where it should be after that. And, we wanted that to improve, and unfortunately didn't quite get there with Gabs, but she's really determined to get herself back in there. And that really put us behind a bit because she was our wing defence. So that was really tough. So we had to look for a new wing defence, and Jamie Lee Price was part of who we looked for, and lots of things happened, and Ash Brazel started really getting back in there, and so there are many complications to selection. That's all I'll say, that people don't know in the background. And we also had the retirements, which I know have been discussed ad nauseum, that I've forced people out. I don't force people out. I make selection decisions. We have a policy where we go to the career diamonds before they're either selected or not selected to give them the chance to do their retirement if they wish to. And some of those players decide to do that. Like, I've heard that people said that I asked Laura Geitz to retire. I never have asked Laura Geitz to retire. You wouldn't want to not have a captain of her ability not in your team. And, we know that there are players knocking on the door underneath other players, and I know what level people are training at, and are they really at that high performance level? And I have to make decisions about that with players. So that's the complicated mix in selection. Katie Thwaites has done it her way, which is just, I'm so proud of her. We haven't talked about anything. She got selected in this team on her merit for the Constellation Cup, and she's already made a decision that she was going at the end of it, and good on her. And she told us, which was great, so we got to celebrate it. And so it was a perfect, in many respects, perfect ending for her, other than our two benchmark events, which she dearly would have wanted to win as well. But at least she has 2:15 and 2:14 as, an extremely important member of our team for both of those championships.
Obviously, there's a changing of the guard moving through.
Yeah, there is. It's exciting. I'm just totally excited about it. That's why I really want to continue into the third cycle as coach. And look, it's not unprecedented. Joyce Brown had 3 World Cups. She won all 3, of course. And she had time out in between all those to have her 4 children. But, I'm really keen. I've got the energy, drive, hopefully the athletes, and I think they are on board and want me to continue, but that's up to the board to decide. I'm very mindful of that. And at the end of the day, it'll be my honour to serve the Australian netball team if that's what the board decides.
And their contract's up at the end of 2020?
Yeah, contract's up at the end of 2020, and I've helped our netball coaches to put some new clauses into contracts, including payout clauses, because we're in a not that well paid coaching position, can I tell you, compared to some of our other male compatriots. So I've said, you've got to put 12-month clauses in, because I can't necessarily go back to teaching halfway through a year, for example. So I've got that contract payout clause in unless I do something really wrong, which is maybe I shouldn't have mentioned the robot porn, but sorry, it's just an idea. It wasn't anything real. And it's just, at the end of the day, it's a contract, and I'm going to fulfil my contract to the end of 2020, and we'll see what happens after that.
What does it mean to you to see women in coaching positions at the highest level, not just in netball but across all sports?
I'm just trying to think of the name of the US coach of the football team, and look, I've read her story and everything about her, and I'm just voracious at reading about particularly female coaches, because I want to know what makes them tick too, and what their journey's been and what their background is. She came from, I think, her father was military, so I get that, and she had to move around a lot, and just what she's done is she's just amazing. I absolutely adore her, and also the Dutch coach as well, who I'm really following. Alison Annan, I love. She's my favourite hockey player ever, and she is the Netherlands coach. I mean, it's just amazing what she has achieved, being a top player and then being the coach of the number one women's team in the world.
We know you love AFL footy. Would you ever consider being an AFL coach, perhaps the first ever female AFL coach?
Oh, look, players make the transition.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Look, I've put it out there that I would love to do that one day, but I'm also mindful that there are a couple of candidates that I reckon should be ahead of me, including Peter Searle and Michelle Cowan and Beck Goddard, who've done the hard yards. That's a whole thing. That's, and Debbie Lee and all of the AFLW coaches who've done they've done their time, and they're really good. I mean, if I was lucky enough to be involved in a club in the future, I think it's more going to be in the director of coaching positions. But you never say never. At the moment, it's a bit, the AFL men's coaches have gone for the younger ones with the kind of wise old blokes with more grey hair looking out over them. Let's see what happens in the future. Maybe some women might actually improve things. Who knows? Be quite interesting, wouldn't it?
Yes.
It's a bit like the Prime Minister. I say to the Diamonds, I want a Prime Minister out of you one day, the lot of you. Somebody's got to do it.
Yeah.
I reckon Geitsy's got the ability to do it.
I want to loop back to your mention of your voracious appetite for learning and reading about other top female coaches worldwide. Do you go on sabbaticals, much like we know the AFL coaches do and NRL coaches, some of them? How do you go and learn about other top female coaches worldwide?
I really would like a Harvard scholarship one day, please. Chief Executive Women, please. No, they have actually offered me one, but I haven't had time to do it. Not offered me one, but to put in for one, seriously. Look, I try to make my own journey in professional development, and one of them is to go to other sports. So I love rugby. So Eddie Jones has been really kind and allowed me into the English rugby inner sanctum, and where I've contributed, I think, to some of the stuff that perhaps you may see now in their program. I don't know.
What would that be?
Well, things like we spoke about from a high performance point of view with the Diamonds, with the players really having ownership of their leadership. So he's spoken to me about that quite a bit. How we handled our loss from the Commonwealth Games. He was straight on the phone to me talking about it with me, which was actually really kind of him to do that, because he knew that it was a time that I was absolutely in despair, but he was trying to turn it around into a learning experience for me. And I really appreciated that from him. So Eddie and I are pretty good mates, and we text each other a lot and just support each other as an Aussie coach over in England. I've worked, been and observed Nathan Buckley and him coaching, and Brendan McCartney and quite a few of the AFL coaches.
What about Alistair Clarkson? You're a Hawthorn supporter?
Yeah, been to Hawthorn, but not sort of closely with Alistair. Maybe it's a bit, the club you barrack for, you kind of want to keep kind of mysterious. I don't know.
In case you find out something.
And you don't want to be telling your club coach you barrack for stuff about, he doesn't want to hear that from me, I'm certain. But I do speak to Damien Carroll quite a bit, the director of coaching, and Chris Fagan and I got on really well, and Fags is now at Brisbane. David Rath, I've got a lot of time for, and St Kilda are really lucky to have him. So it's not like I haven't spent some time there.
So tell us how you handled the Com Games loss.
Well, luckily I got to go away on holiday. There was a bit of a media storm about some comments I made, which really upset me. You wouldn't know about them at the time because it probably wasn't a big deal for you, but to the netball world it was a big deal. I mentioned something about England having their high performance system paid for by, I don't know whether I actually said it like that, but in reality that is actually the reality. And then, of course, I apologised to Tracy and sent her it, because I know Tracy Neville personally, and I sent her a message and said, mate, you've just done something that is just amazing. Even though the players, of course, are here, she's still got to put them together, pick the team, do all of the stuff, the hard yards with the team, and it can go pear-shaped very easily, believe me. So it was an enormous achievement from Tracy, and I certainly didn't want it to sound disingenuous at all. But the reality is a reality. And what I was trying to say to my naysayers, and there's a few of them out there, was, just cool your jets, will you lot. Be a little bit more discerning and intelligent about this loss. And yes, it is one goal and it was a pain in the backside. And, oh, yes, I made changes and, for goodness sake, can we get away from... And Eddie said the same thing. You journalists need to understand that a team is now 23 players and they rotate on and off on a rugby field as well. So times have changed. It's not like the old days.
What do you make of Joyce Brown's comments on the back of the Australian Netball's performance in the past 12 months, where she's saying the national coach should be part of the national competition?
Yeah, I think Joyce is actually not on the right track there, and I would wish her luck if she wanted to do it today in this. And I actually don't think she actually meant that. I think what she was trying to say is that we've got to be aware that the national coach needs practice, and what she's probably saying is we need more test matches. Now, I can tell you I've coached more test matches the last 2 years than most of the Super Netball coaches have coached in their seasons. So I've actually had a lot of practice, and I don't think it can work. That's my personal view, because of the integrity issues that you would have with selection of the team. In the world's best competition, to then be in it, coaching it, you're going to imbalance things at some stage. And part of the, I guess, want of the competition is to be an equitable competition and to have everyone having a chance to win. So if you stack one team with an Australian coach, of course all the players are going to go and want to play for them. I mean, it's a worry now even that we have Kylie Byrne as our 21s coach, as the head coach of Sunshine Coast Lightning. So I'm concerned about that, not overly, but we have to be mindful of it, that's all, because we need our competition to be strong in every state, including Adelaide, who needs, obviously Adelaide need to lift their game, so do Perth. And so it's really important for us to remain competitive against the other sports that we've, got on TV. Channel 9 need the ratings. That's really important.
And what about Joyce's other comments with regards to only one international player per team? Do you agree?
Yeah, I agree with Joyce on that. And we've had Joyce is a very close and dear mentor to me. And I think what she was trying to say with the other one wasn't necessarily saying... she was sort of trying to say, wouldn't it be nice if Lisa had the chance to coach a Suncorp Super Netball team plus do the national? I don't actually reckon that's a good idea anyway from one person, because it's just a huge, huge role. And, of course, Nolene put her hand up and said it actually was really too hard. So that's why she's going just to the Silver Ferns. And she had to rely on her assistants so much that obviously one of them needed a break in the last series as well. So, but the other one is, when we first brought in the Suncorp Super Netball, our high performance unit, on behalf of Andrew Collins, our general manager, we put forward 2 imports per team. That was what our strategy was, and it was denied, I guess. The board saw it more important to have unlimited imports.
Because they wanted to strengthen the competition?
I think they wanted to really test the economics of the situation. It's it in a nutshell.
Now, you did mention that, you've had a lot more test experience than anyone else. Well, big congratulations. You did coach your 100th test most recently with an amazing 82 win to 18 loss ratio, which is absolutely amazing.
Well, that's 82%.
Yeah.
Absolutely brilliant. Like, what other coach, what other national coach has that?
Yeah.
Sorry, I just even realised that, because we're maths teachers. Yeah.
Well, to come from being, as we said earlier, the first coach to have never played in a test yourself, to now being the only one to ever coach 100, did you ever think you'd get to this point? Absolutely not.
I was just happy to get through the first couple of years. They were really tough on my own, and now I reflect back on it. I've just become a VIS board member, and Anne-Marie and I were discussing For example, Simone McInnes is employed by the VIS and she works with those performance team, and that's where she is. Whereas I had to, unlike Norma, who was employed by the AIS and got to work in Canberra, I had to work in the office and be a national coach in the Netball Australia office. That was a huge adjustment for me, personally and professionally. And there are many things that I had to say and stick up for myself on because I was a coach, which is different to being an administrator, that I would not have had to do if I was at, say, the VIS or the AIS. So it brought home to me the other day about that, how tough it actually was to do the job, with the pressure, with the expectation you were going to grow the brand of netball as well. I didn't have a high performance manager when I first started. I came in as the combined high performance manager plus coach.
Massive juggle.
Yeah, it was, but that's all we had at the time. That's the resourcing we had, and we only had, I think, there was 3 of us on the high performance staff. Now we have 6. Woohoo!
So what's on the horizon for you now, Lisa? You're hoping for another cycle as the national coach. You've got 100 tests under your belt. What are you looking forward to?
Oh, definitely to get the succession planning right. If I am lucky enough to be offered that next cycle, I will be signing in blood that I'm finishing, definitely, because I think I'll be 60. It's enough, and it'll be definitely enough time for one person to have such a footprint on the system. But I have to say, I'm going to have to work really hard in this period to put a succession plan in place in terms of not necessarily one person, but to enable the people who are going to put their hands up for the next cycle to really get a great understanding and immersion into the diamond. So whether it's through being an assistant coach or a specialist coach or coming in and shadowing or whatever it needs to be, netball, I think, can do that really well, and I'm certainly prepared to do that.
Yeah.
No, I'm good.
That's
I'm good.
What about then Australian netball? You're an integral component of it, but what about the team? What about the world ranking, the World Cup, Commonwealth Games?
Oh, look, it's the same as it always is. We want to be world number 1, which means we have to keep winning and beating our closest opposition, which is New Zealand. I think we need to play more test matches and we need more time on task, which means we need actually more camps together. What we've found over the past 2 years is we've had less time on task than our competitors have, and we've been really, pushing the literal uphill. So, whilst we've had great players to do the work, they still have to have time to work together.
Just before we go, Lisa, we did have Maddie Brown on a couple of weeks ago as a guest, and she told us this story about how she was waiting to find out about her selection and waiting for a phone call from you, to the point of her feeling so sick about it. What is the pressure like for you calling players either to say yes or no? What's that experience like?
Well, it's interesting Maddie would say that, because I actually remember when she did her knee, and I remember where I was exactly. I was in Botswana. I'd been to Namibia on a visit, and I was sitting there watching the phone and scores, and it was, I think, at the time it was Vixens playing, Fever, actually, and also Hawthorn were playing at the same time. So I was actually watching both scores on my phone, and I saw there'd been this break, and I just had this sinking feeling. And then I got a text message from Annie Sargent to say, Maddie's gone down. And I just thought, oh my goodness, because obviously she played with us in Glasgow as part of our gold medal winning team. So that meant we had to have a new wing attack. And history shows, Maddie missed out on that team. But then, for her to come back for that Commonwealth Games in 2018, I appreciated what she was talking about, because we had to go through this whole huge big spiel. It was actually part of the Commonwealth Games requirements, legal requirements, what we actually had to say.
Phone calls where they say you must listen to this.
Yes, yep, it's sort of like that, and then tick the box if you're okay with the conditions of rah, rah, rah. So it was a big, long, and then the girls had to keep it a secret, actually, literally for a week.
Okay.
And then they didn't even know when they all came in together to Netball Victoria, the ones that are in Victoria, and we had a big photo. So they actually didn't even know who each other was in. So they actually saw each other for the first time, the Victorians, at that presentation at Netball Victoria. So, yeah, it was highly emotional. And I remember Maddie saying to me afterwards that she was literally going to be sick. And she was just saying, hurry up. And I'm thinking I had to be consistent and do that for everyone. So there is great joy in the ones that get it. But then, unfortunately, the ones that don't get in, they do really drag you down. There's no other way to say it. It absolutely kills me. The last World Cup phone calls that I did this year, where the players that missed out, was just harrowing, actually. And I don't like it at all. And people think, it's really easy. It's not easy. I'm a person. I've got feelings. I bleed. And, it hurts. And I try to do it in the most empathetic way I can, where I talk about, I adore them as people. I truly do try and treat them like my daughters in terms of love and care for the person. But, sometimes I have to give them that news, and it's really hard.
It's like you saying that you talk to your students like they're your kids.
Yeah. It's that relationship, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, when the kids know you care about them, as you know as a teacher, then they'll jump really high for you. And that's how I approached all my maths lessons, particularly with the kids that are weaker at maths. I had a soft spot for, and not that I was weak at maths, I was very good, but I know it's hard, and it's often a psychological confidence thing. And as soon as you give them a bit of confidence and give them a way of getting into maths, then they usually fly. And that's what I found with my teaching, which I really enjoyed.
Thank you so much, Lisa. We really appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you very much. It's been so much fun, Tiffany. I've admired your career and what you've done for a long time. And Amanda, another fellow maths teacher. Awesome.
Yes, who's the one who started the Sportswomen Australia Instagram account.
It's collaboration.
It's a collaboration, as all good work is.
Speaking of Instagram account, what are our handles?
You can follow us on Facebook and Instagram on Sportswomen Australia, and on Twitter at SportswomenAU. And Lisa, if people want to follow you, where can they do that?
Well, let me think. Twitter, I'm Coach Lisa A, which I really like because I used to be called Miss A at Wesley College when I was teaching maths there. And on Instagram, I'm Coach Lisa Alexander, all one word.
Lovely. All that information can be found below in our show notes as well. So thank you again, Lisa. We've really appreciated having you.
I've loved it. It's great being with, sporty nerds like me.
Absolutely.